Okay guys, we're inside this beetle shed where he takes the skulls and puts them into these beetles, and they eat all the flesh and fat and tissue, anything living that's not bone, basically, right?
That's right.
So,
The only thing that these beetles don't eat is metal, glass, and bone, basically. Everything else they'll eat through.
I just asked him if, so I'll show you these beetles. See him down in there, crawling around.
So I have this bedding in the bottom of the tanks. It's actually just a roll of flat cotton about an inch thick when I put it in there. They cut little tunnels in it like ants. And so there's little tunnels all around it, and it tends to make the cotton just puff up, so it kind of looks like a sponge. So it ends up being 4 or 5 inches thick, and that's where they live and lay their eggs and pupate and stuff.
They just keep reproducing.
They keep reproducing. They lay 3 to 5 eggs a day. They hatch in a few days, the eggs. They go through 8 molts between their first hatch and becoming adults, and that takes about 45 days. It varies with the temperature of where they are. The warmer it is, the faster that all happens. But that's an average. And then they live as adults for 30 to 40 days, and then they die.
And do you have to feed them that whole time?
Yeah, they have to be fed all the time. And I usually have enough heads that I pretty much have a project for them going year round. They're just finishing this up. I actually had it laying down in there when they're working on it. But I tilled it up, and then I'll take a little rubber mallet and hammer on these tines, and it knocks the beetles loose. And then I'll actually take it out and go through the degreasing process, which for elk is just boiling for a little while. Remove the oils from the bone, and then it's whitened with some high-powered hydrogen peroxide solution. I just immerse them in.
Do they crawl up?
They'll crawl up those antlers, but somewhat, but not too much.
I asked him if they crawl up the sides of this thing, and he's, what'd you say?
If I keep the sides of the tanks clean, they can't climb anything vertical. So they'll start up and they'll fall off. But if it gets over 85 degrees in here, they can fly out. And I usually try to keep it about 80. In fact,
Was that a beetle?
One by right there.
Yeah, he was on your head.
Another thing that will give them a tendency to fly is if they see light, they'll fly to the light.
Okay.
So I always keep it dark in here. We opened the shutters so we could have some light for videography, and so a few of them are making a break for the window.
That's right.
But I'm going to put this lion skull we were just looking at over here in this tank. We'll come back in a few minutes and I'll show you what they do. Some of this stuff is just stuff I have in here for food right now. Stick that right there.
Do they kind of swarm onto the...
They will. In a couple hours, that thing will be completely black with beetles. They can smell the meat, and they'll start heading that way.
So do some taxidermists just not use beetles at all?
Yeah, that's quite a process, and takes a lot of work to keep them healthy and active and working right. And the smell factor, a lot of people don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So
It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Just some new cotton.
yeah, this is a new colony I'm starting. I just put little pieces of meat in there and got adults. There's probably 400 or 500 adults in there, and they will start laying eggs. Actually, there are some larvae in here now that have just hatched. They're very teeny. These little dark specks near my finger. Those are all little beetles, larvae. So the larvae look like little caterpillars. Let me catch some of them. Look at them close. The larvae look like these little caterpillar-looking things.
And then the beetle.
And I'll get some adults here. And these
This is going to freak the kids out.
These are adults. These are adults right there, except for that little larva right there. That's what the adults look like. They're just about the size of a housefly. They're not like the beetles on the movie The Mummy.
I know some of you are cringing right now. Ah! What else do we want to know about these beetles? Do you put this on?
Yeah, that screen goes on this tank. It's got a hinge in the middle, and that's for in the summer when I can't keep it below 85 degrees and they're trying to fly out. I'll put screens on, but this time of year I can regulate the temperature and keep it down.
Okay. It's so cold outside, you just run a heater and
This building's really insulated. There's like 6 inches of foam all the way on every side, including the floor, and a little teeny electric heater will keep it 80 degrees in here, real easy.
pretty easy. See some of
There's a
them.
few of them starting to go. We'll come back here in a few minutes, and they probably will be all over that.
Cool.
In fact, if I move it down here off this, oh, make it do it faster.
When it's quiet, you can. It sounds like if you listen to a soda when you pour it in a cup or something and it's fizzing and kind of bubbling. You can hear that fizziness. That's what it sounds like down in there, just from the beetles crawling around and doing their thing. So.
Well, here's one thing: you have to water the beetles. I just spray them with this spray bottle. Just give them a little mist once a day. And in fact, while I'm doing this, in a few minutes, you'll see a whole bunch of little small larvae come to the top.
They'll just come out.
They'll come out and start, so they can get a drink. It takes a few minutes, but they'll start showing up right there.
So when you order these batches of beetles, what comes to you?
I got mine from a place in Montana, a guy that does this same thing. I think I just got like 50 adult bugs. And you just put them in a tank such as this with some bedding, cotton. They use different things. I use cotton because I actually replace it a couple times a year. I find that if I don't, I get mites. Some insects get mites. They're basically like small ticks, and they'll attack the colony, and they don't kill them, but they make them sick so that they won't eat and they don't do any work. And I found that if I leave the bedding for a long time, I have problems with mites. But if I change it a couple times a year, it's not such a problem.
So you just pick it up out of there and
I'll just
shake
roll
it
that
off?
up. I'll actually start putting big chunks of meat in there, and then come back in an hour, shake all the beetles off into a bucket or something, and then I'll roll up till I get most of them out of the bedding, and then I'll roll up the bedding, and I'll put it in the freezer for a week or so to make sure it freezes clear through, because like at 32 degrees, they're basically dead.
Yeah.
As soon as it's freezing, it'll kill them. And so I make sure that all the larvae and things that are still in the bedding are dead, and then I'll dispose of the bedding and roll out new cotton and start over.
Any on the surface?
They're starting to show up, but they're very tiny. I don't know if they'll show. Usually they're around the pieces of meat, but like there's starting to be some right around there. Oh, here there's starting to be these little black flecks or larvae. Won't focus on it. And these are very tiny. I just started this colony like a week ago, so it's like
They're
first
still
bolt,
really
very
tiny. So you can see that they're already.
They're starting to move up, especially the bottom edges.
Yep, they're climbing all over the edges on the bottom and eating all that meat. Okay. Stinks in here.
Yes, it does.
Okay. This is the bleaching shed.
Yeah, this is where I whiten the skulls. I use 34% hydrogen peroxide.
And you said the store hydrogen peroxide is what?
Yeah, what you get at the drugstore in the little brown bottles is 3%.
So this is pretty powerful.
Yeah, if it gets on you, it burns like acid. You know it's on you. And I actually immersed the skulls right down in it. So this is a deer skull I put in there this morning. Usually leave them overnight. And
It just whitens it.
and then I'll take it out of here and put it in some bright light. Direct sunlight's the best, and just go white like that antelope skull that was inside.
Do you have to keep the antler out?
Yeah, the antler, it'll turn the antlers, it'll brown or whiten the antlers as well. So I try to keep the bird of the antlers out and just wrap those towels around it, and that kind of wicks the stuff up around the burr.
Okay. Use something in there too.
Yeah, I can't remember what's in there. Oh, I think I have an antelope in there. In here, I have an antelope skull. It still has some brown dark spots in it, but once it gets in the direct light, it'll all go snow white.
So an antelope skull, the horn is different.
Yeah, the actual horn, there's a bone core, this is the bone, that goes up inside of the horn. There's actually a tissue between the horn and the bone. It's like a hairless skin. This is like the thickness of skin. And the beetles eat that off. And there's the reason I have the holes drilled in the bone is because there's a porous, kind of a porous bone, like bone marrow, I guess, inside the antler, and it's all full of fat, and I have to get that out of there. And so I drill into it. So during the degreasing process and
then you
stuff,
just
it cleans it out.
slip the horn over the top for the antelope.
And basically glue the horn back onto the bone core. All horned animals are that same way. The horns come off, and there's a bone core with the tissue between the horn and the bone.
Like bighorn sheep, is that?
Sheep, everything that has a horn rather than an antler it's the same.
So the deer and the elk are the antler, and
Right.
antelope and bighorn sheep are
So
a
the difference
horn.
is antlers are shed every year and regrown every year. Horns stay on for the life of the animal.
Okay. So you can see that skull is pretty covered by beetles now.
If you want, we wait and come back again another time. I don't know how much time you want.
I don't know.
If that's good enough.
Probably
Shut
good
the
enough.
shutters.
Probably good enough.
Okay. And I noticed that the beetles flying around.
You guys are probably grossed out enough by those beetles, huh? I won't show you anymore. Okay, so buffalo, huh?
Yeah, this is a young bull buffalo, like the antelope horns. The horn comes off the bone core. And the deer and the antelope in the peroxide will end up as white as this once they're finished soaking and then dry.
So most of a buffalo's head is just fat and skin and hair
Yeah.
and cartilage, that big round head.
Yeah, on the top part of the bull bison's head, the skin is nearly 2 inches thick.
Whoa.
And it's interesting because their hide is not that thick after you get back off their neck and around their body. It's quite thin. It's not any thicker than an elk hide, but around their head it's
Just
super thick.
Just on top?
Yep. On the front and top and around the horns here, it's literally about 2 inches thick
Really?
on a mature bull. We can go in here and see a variety of different skulls.
And the others.
Okay, here's a mountain lion skull that's all finished, except it hasn't been whitened yet. So it'll still go in the hydrogen peroxide.
But the beetles have cleaned it all
Yeah,
off?
it's all clean and this one's been degreased. It's always interesting to me to think about that a mountain lion this size can actually kill an elk.
Yeah,
And those canines are only that long.
yeah. That's what
And
they
this
use.
is what we're talking about.
They just,
They
But-
get a hold of them and take them down, and it's amazing.
don't let go, huh?
Okay, here's a bobcat skull. Basically looks just like a lion skull, only it's smaller.
A lot smaller, huh?
You should give a prize for whoever can tell you what this one is.
Can you guys tell what that is?
That is a coatimundi.
What's a coatimundi?
It's a little animal that lives Mexico, I think South America, and in southern parts of Arizona and New Mexico. I think this one came from Arizona.
You know how to spell it?
Coat, I think it's Imundi. It's something close to that. If you Google that, it'll pop up with the right spelling.
With whatever that animal is, huh?
Yeah, they have a ring tail. They're kind of long, weasel looking, only size of a house cat, maybe a little bigger. There's a wolf skull.
Now that's a big
This is a big wolf skull.
tooth set. You could see how they could take down an elk.
And not only with those teeth, but you got to remember there'll probably be 12 or 13 of them that do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe not quite that big a pack, but there'll be more than one. Here's an interesting one. This is an aoudad, type of sheep.
Interesting. This is a salt bed from Salt and the Hide?
Yeah, this is where I salt the hides.
Just lay it out and put salt on there?
Mm-hmm.
Can you reuse the salt over and
Oh,
over?
somewhat. You can't indefinitely, but yeah, you can somewhat. You can do a few hides in it.
Some caribou? So this is with the velvet still on. I told you guys in another video that these elk and deer, they grow this velvet on the antlers when they grow their antlers back in the late spring through the summer. And then in the fall it dies and then they rub it off. All right?
That's correct.
So sometimes people will shoot one in the early fall and it'll still have the velvet on it. I don't like the way it looks, but some people do.
Yeah. Usually elk will start shedding their velvet in mid to late August. The bigger bulls usually go shed the velvet first. Deer don't, usually mule deer at least, don't start shedding until second week of September. And it varies from year to year, but that's roughly the time frame.
Okay. Do you want to tell us your grizzly story in there with the grizzly?
Oh yeah, we can.
Okay. So these were your mounts, all right?
And everything in this room are my own. They're all from bow hunts. They're all bow hunting trophies. My most exciting hunt was this grizzly bear. The short version of the story is we spotted the bear. We stopped to within 45 yards of him.
Where were you?
This was in Alaska. We were right on the Arctic Circle north of Galena. I guess you can look that up on a map. I think it's like northwest Alaska. And this bear was laying on a dead moose. And so the grizzlies, when they have a food source, they kind of bury it. They'll pull dirt and debris up on it, and then they just camp on it, and they stay there until it's gone to protect it from other scavengers, I suppose. But anyway, he would just lay there and sleep, and then he'd get up once in a while and feed, and then he'd lay back down and sleep. And over the course of a couple hours, we stopped within 45 yards of him, and I kind of ran out of cover, and it was just right out on the tundra. There was no brush. It was just a little short, scrubby brush and grass, and I kept trying to get closer. I wanted to get within 40 yards of him, and eventually he noticed me. He didn't recognize what I was. I just kind of crouched over out there, and he got up off the moose and started walking towards me. And there was one little bush between him and me, and as his eyes went behind the bush, I drew my arrow back so he didn't detect the movement, and then he kept walking, and I'm just kind of counting off the steps as he comes towards me. And because with bow hunting, it's not like a rifle. You have different sight pins for the different yardages, and so you have to kind of estimate the yardage before you shoot. And anyway, he came within about 25 yards, and all of a sudden he just turned sideways. And the preferred shot is from the side, because the arrow can penetrate both lungs, and then that makes a humane, quick, fast kill. And he turned sideways, and I got to shoot, and he bears always turn and bite at the arrow, and when he did, I just dropped straight on the ground, flat as I could be, because I knew that once he bit, he'd bite for the arrow and roll around there a second, and then he'd jump up and start looking for what the trouble was. I didn't want him to see me, so that's what he did. He flipped over, and a piece of the arrow was still sticking out of him about that much, and he bit that off, looked around for a minute and couldn't see anything, and so he took off and ran into a patch of brush, and that was it.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, I guess. I wanted him too bad. I'd been bow hunting a long time. I had an opportunity to hunt the grizzly. I actually was lucky. It was a random drawing. I was able to get the permit, and he's a big bear, and I wanted him so bad. I didn't think about nervous. I was concentrating on getting the job done. I got nervous afterwards when you start thinking about all the things that could have happened.
As he's so close to you, yeah. Protecting his moose.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Any other exciting stories about any of these animals?
Oh, well, they're all exciting. There's a lot of them, so there's a lot of stories.
Where'd you get your bighorn sheep?
Probably the most challenging of all my hunts has been the bighorn sheep. Not so much of the sheep itself is the challenge. It's where they live and the logistics of getting there and camping and hunting, and they're hard to find. And once you find them, they're not as hard to get as some of the other animals. But a friend and I packed in with horses 35 miles back into the wilderness. The closest road in any direction was over 30 miles.
Where was this?
And this was in the North Fork of the Yellowstone River in Wyoming. If you looked on a map and you found the towns of Du Bois, Jackson, and Cody, it would be right in the middle of all those three. And that it would make the triangle and be about in the middle of that triangle. It's actually the most remote place in the whole United States. That's the farthest you can get from a road anywhere in the regular United States. So it just, we did it on our own, no outfitters or guides. And so because of all that, it was a challenge. You know?
And you got it with a bow.
And you got it with a bow.
That'd be tough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you got any advice if any of these kids want to grow up to be a taxidermist?
Probably the fastest, best way to learn would be to get into a good taxidermy school. And you can Google taxidermy schools, and there'll be several. Just check references and find out how much time it requires and how much expense it requires to do the school. And you just have to learn the basics and start. You get better and better the longer you do it, and you learn something every time you do a mount. And the best taxidermists are probably the ones who've done the most heads the longest.
You just stick with it.
Yep.
Good. All right. Thank you, Ronell, and thanks for coming with me on this field trip, guys. We'll see you next week. Bye.